this screencast is going to show how to do functions, and basically a few different kinds of functions. And this is the ActionScript file here. There is a zip file I'll make available on the class website that you can download this from. If not, you can hit pause here and copy this code and make sure it's running. And when it runs right now, it should just draw a rectangle, like so. Okay, it's a blue rectangle with a gray border. And we'll notice here that the border is from this line here. This says it's 2 pixels wide, and this says what color it is. And these things are alpha and some other things we don't have to worry about right now. This is the fill color, so that's the color of the blue that it's going to be. And then we have here, actually if you delete one of those commas and hit a comma, it'll show you the different values. So we have the x and the y, the position of it, and then the width and the height of the rectangle. And so that's then end fill, and add child adds it to stage. So that's our code. Let's look at how we're going to use the functions related to it. So one of the first ones is just the basic function. And that is really just a place where you can dump a line of code and run it when you want to run it. So I'm going to take this code here, and instead of having it up there, I'm going to plop it into this function. And now you do have to check and see it. Occasionally there is a variable that you might use somewhere that was only valid in this function here because it was created in that function, and you're going to have to deal with that. But in this case, there's no code there. So instead of where we put that code, we're just going to write the name of our function with the parentheses, and it's going to call that function. So what's going to happen is at this point, it's going to run that function, right, in place of the code. So really nothing has changed, and this is one of the basic ways to use a function. And let's run it. Alright, so there we go, and the function is still running. And what you'll see is that basically what's going on here is that it's running at this point and going down and running these lines of code. Then when it hits here, it comes back up and runs any more as well. So it goes in that direction and comes back. Alright, so now let's look at something a little bit more. Let's say we want to have parameters. And so the reason for parameters is that you might want to change something each time you run the function. So I'm going to copy this function here that we have and paste it, and I'm going to call this circle with parameters. Okay, so here's what parameters are. It's variables that we create right here when we're defining our function that can set things. So I can say, for example here, maybe we want to set the line width. Alright, so I'm going to call it L width. Alright, and I have to give it a data type like any variable. So those are integers because it's going to replace this width here. Okay, so I do L width int, and then here in place of that I write L width. Okay, and now when I call this circle with parameters, I have to add a value for that. So I'm going to put here 4. Alright, and I'm going to comment out for a second this basic one, so it just runs that. So what's going to happen now is this value here, 4, is going to go down and become the value for that variable, and then that variable gets used here. Alright, so I have an error here. I had to type something wrong. Let's just see what I did. Access of undefined property L width. So I must have spelled it wrong in one of those places. When you get undefined property, that's usually how it works. Yes, I misspelled width here, W-D-I-T-H. So there we go. Now that they're spelled the same, it should be able to run. So there we go. So now I have one where that is now 4, and then by just changing this to something else, I can change that. And usually what we want to do is actually have a few more of that. So let's add some more in here. So I want to change the color I can use for that as well. So I'm going to use it kind of L color for line color. Now this is a hex value. Anything that starts with 0x in it is hex, but hex is really just a number. So on data type, I'm just going to write number here. All right, and so I'm going to cut that out, and instead of that, now we have L color. And now also, when we call it, we want to give that a value. So I'm just going to give one here that's going to be red. And now I can run it, and great, there we are. Now I have it as a red line. That's 10 pixels wide. And let's say we also want to change our fill color. So let's go here, and we're going to change that. I'm going to call it F color. That's also a number. Alright. And instead of this now, that's our fill, we're going to use F color. And we'll give that a color too. So I'll give it that old gray color that the other one had. Alright, so now when I run it, I get a gray color in there. So what's happening here again, just to reiterate, is that each of these values gets passed in to the variables when I call the function. And then those variables are in turn used in the function to however I want to use them. Alright, so let's add a couple more. We're going to add in width. Oh, sorry, I'm not at it here yet. Let's add it here. W for width, which is a number as well, or really width is probably more of an integer. And then we're going to add H for height, which is also going to be an integer. And I want to also change the X position of it as I go. Which is an int, and the Y position int as well. So now the other thing to just notice when we're doing this is when I'm calling this method, this function now, well, it could be a method too if it's in a class, it'll show me here the various values that I have, the options. So I hit comma, and I see, oh, look, here's width, height, and so forth. And the one that is bolded is the one that I'm currently supposed to give a value to. So I know, oh, I need to add an int here for that W property. So width is going to be 75. Height will make 200. And X position is going to be 25. And Y position 25. Okay. So now I should get a circle where I have all these different pieces of it that can be varied. Whoops, I made a mistake that you notice nothing is different here. The reason being is that I didn't use these new parameters that I made in my function, right? So you can make all you want. When you make it, you have to pass a value to it, but if you don't use it, then nothing's there. So right here, just remember, it starts with X and Y, then width and height. Alright, so we have X position, Y position, width, height. Delete all the rest here. Okay, so now we have that there. So that's great. Let's run this again. There we go. There's our nice 75 pixel by 200 pixel tall square. And I could use this within a for loop. So I is less than, let's just say 5 for now. So I have a for loop here, and I'm just going to do that each time. And I'm going to call circle with parameters and set a random X and Y and on it in a certain height. So circle with parameters. Actually, let's make a random width and height first too. So var W int equals math random times let's say up to 200. Actually, no, I really don't want. I don't care about the width and height for now. Let's make the x and the y a number, and we'll go up to 400. Alright, so we're going to make that, and then copy that for the y. Alright, so each one of them can go between 0 and 400, and then we're going to call circle with parameters. And the line width, we're going to just say 2 for now. The line color, keep it red. And the other one, let's change this around. The fill's green. Alright, and so the width, we're just going to say 50 pixels, and the height, 50 pixels. X position, we're going to use that X pos variable I just made, and Y pos variable I just made. And something to note here, by the way, since we're on it, because I said var xpos, this one is going to not affect at all that xpos there, because that's created in this function. So each function, if you create a variable inside of it and parameters count as a variable that's created inside a function, that variable only lasts within that function. Okay, so let's see how this runs. Alright, so there I got 4 circles randomly placed throughout the screen. If I run it again, should keep randomly placing them. Maybe I can change my values. But this is the other benefit of having a function with parameters to do something, even just a basic function. I could put the basic circle in here as well. But the only thing with the basic one is that it would just do the same thing 4 times in the same place. So I'd get that same circle here, over and over, and the same 4 times each time. Okay. So take that one out for now. Alright, so that's kind of cool. So now we have one with a basic one. We have parameters, and now we're going to see a function that has a return value. So sometimes you don't actually want to do something like, let's say I don't want to add this child here, or I might want to modify certain other properties on my code. So I'm going to take out for now this add child, and I'm going to call this circle return. Alright, and basically it's going to create a new sprite, and then it's going to return that sprite. Return SP. And if we're going to do a return value like this, then it's important that at the end of the function we say what type that value is. In this case, it's going to be a sprite, right? Because this SP has a value of sprite, and if I'm returning that, then that means that my return value here has to be SP. Most of the time, if your function isn't returning something, you put void there just to show this function doesn't return a value. That's why you see void at the end of all those functions. Right? So in that case, I can do something like this. My SP sprite, equals, and then I'm going to call this function here, circle with return. Circle with return, and then it has some various values. Alright, so I'm just going to actually grab them from here so I don't have to type so much, and I'm going to replace X position, Y position with some numbers. We're going to say 1 and 1 is going to be up at the top left there. So now I have a sprite that is that circle, and then I can do stuff with it. So if I don't do anything here, I'm going to run, I shouldn't see anything, right? Nothing else happens. But I can say now add child, my SP, and that returned it. And now we get that circle, that square up there. I keep calling it circle, I apologize, I was going to use circles and I decided to use rectangles. So this should not be a circle. it's actually not too much. I can just this would be changed to draw a circle. I apologize for that incongruous thing there. I'll change the names of these functions in a minute here. But we're mostly looking at the functions. Alright, so let's just look at what happens here. So I'm going to see if I can get all of this on screen. I'm going to have to probably move some off a bit from your view. Okay, oops. So, let's see, here we are. Okay, so here's what happens. You create a sprite, and it's expecting a value here. And I call circle return, and I pass in these numbers. So all these numbers go in and populate these variables here, like so. Alright, you get the idea. Then those variables are in turn used all down here, right? They're all used in my method. And then this return sp takes the value of that sprite and sends it back up here. And basically what happens is Flash then deletes all of this stuff and puts that sp that we returned in its place. So now my sp is equal to that, and so we can add it out to the stage. Okay, so there's one more thing to do here, which we're going to do. What if you wanted to have parameters that had a default value? So I'm going to copy this one here and paste it in again. And I'm going to start changing some of these names here. We're going to call this circle with default. Alright. And that's that one there. So what default means is you can actually use an equal sign here on these parameters and give it a default value. So let's say I wanted my line width to have a default value of 2 pixels, and I wanted the line color to have a default value of blue. Alright, and then I could have the fill color have a default value of some kind of gray, and then a default width and height. I'm going to say 60, let's say 75. And height equals 75. And then a default X and Y position. So I can have that as 250. Oops, I didn't put my equal sign there. Equals 250, and then Y pos is going to equal 250 as well. So now I have default values for all of these. So in this case, what I can do is, I'm just going to run this just so we see what we have here. Right now we have our one that's drawn in to the custom one, and then this one here that puts in 5 on the random. So I'm going to call my circle with parameters here. And remember, to call this, all I need to do is just write its name with the parentheses. And then in this case, let's put this here. It doesn't tell me that there's default values for these, but I do know. So I'm going to leave it without any values. And, sorry, not parameters. We're doing, sorry, scroll up here so you can see it. Circle with default. Okay, so there it goes. I thought it was supposed to. It's going to show you if it says equals 2 there, equals this, that's showing you it has a default value. And so if you don't put anything down, it'll just use those default values. So I'm going to run that with default, and there we go. That was the one that we got out from our default value one. And you can change those values, you just have to add values in. So if I decide I want my width not to be something other than 2, I can write in 4. Alright? And so then when I run that, now it's going, but it has 4 as its width. One thing that's a little confusing sometimes when you first start out with these is that if you just want to change something like, say, the X position, or the height. You have to set the values for everything else. So I would put in here whatever that default value was. So what I'm going to look at is put this comma here and again. Now it's for line color. If I don't want to change it, I have to write in that value. So I just want to change the height of it here. Then I have to put in the default values for all the other ones before it. Then I can leave off the ones after it. I don't have to put those down because those will go. But the ones before it, I have to put in the same default values that you see there. All right. So let's do that. 2, and that's 0x 0 0 0 0. Oops. FF. Now I'm on F color. That's 0x 5. Then on my width 75. And then let's height. So I'm going to say 200. Change that one. And then I can leave the rest off, and it will keep the default values for those. Alright, so now it's 200 instead of that. So there you go. Those are the basic and advanced ways in which you can use functions. And I apologize again for the word circle. It's drawing squares, rectangles really. Hope you get that.